So one more thing. Now we have photos, which we know is going to be an array of photo strings. Okay. Now we just have to go make this handle index click function. So let's go ahead and do it this way first. We're going to build it wrong first, and then we'll show you how to make it right. Okay, handle index click. This is going to take in an event of some sort like this. And here we just want to call this dot set state, with active being the event dot target dot dataset dot index. So there's two things wrong with this. Let's talk about both of them. The first one, if you've never seen dataset before, this is not a React API. This is a DOM API, right? And dataset allows you to get to things that are on the data, on the HTML tag, right? So I had this image tag here, right? And I had this data index. So this data set that we're referring to, let's close you. There we go. So data set index, that's going to refer to whatever is here, right? So it'll have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in there. Does that make sense? But the thing to keep in mind here is active needs to be a number because we're using it as a number down here, right? Anything that comes back from the DOM is always going to be a string. So we need to convert this into a number. We need to coerce this into a number. There's a number of ways of doing this. You can do parseInt or something like that, or you can just say plus. If you put a what's called a unary plus right there, that will turn it into a number. Okay, so that's problem number one solved. Problem, oh, and I said this, sorry, this dot set state right there. That's a third problem. This dot set state. The other problem that we have here is, what is this? So if I'm calling it as an event listener down here, what do you think this is going to be here?
DOM element.
I think it's nothing. I think it's undefined. But the answer, you're on the right track that it's not correct, right? We need it to be the component, right? We need it to be the carousel component because we want to call the set state on the carousel component. And this is either window or it's, I think it's undefined. I think React makes it undefined. Regardless, it's not what you want it to be. So how would I make this correct? Well, there's two methodologies here. I'll show you both of them. If I had a constructor up here, so just say I had constructor props, and you don't have to copy this one. I'm just showing you this one, super props. What you could do here, if you don't have public class properties enabled in your project, which many of you will not, you can come in here and put this dot handle index equals this dot handle index dot bind this. This looks ridiculous, right? But what is this actually doing, right? It's binding the context of handle index click to be carousel. Because we know what this is inside of the constructor, we're guaranteed it's going to be the correct context, right? So this means that handle index click can then be called, and this will always be correct, right? So this works. There's an even easier way to do this, though, if you have public class properties like this. I can just turn this into an arrow function. Now it's correct again, right? Because we talked about arrow functions, right? They don't create new context when they're invoked, which means that it gets it lexically, which is not actually technically correct, but effectively is correct, right? So this is determined when you write it, right? So this is going to be wherever it was written, whereas if I call a function like this function here, right, it's going to be wherever it's invoked. Now I recognize it's probably not it's kind of an odd distinction to make, but suffice to say, this will have the correct this because this event listener is not going to create a new context. So I'm going to give you just kind of a rule of thumb here. Whenever you are passing functions down into children, right, or whenever you're doing event listeners, use an arrow function. Because that will guarantee what this is correct. Like notice here in our component in mountain details, in this one, Notice that we didn't have to do any sort of magic for this.setState for component did mount. That's because component did mount we already know is going to have the correct context. Same thing with render. Render is always going to have the correct context. So it's really just event listeners and functions that you're passing into children. That's it.